Imagine being 320,000 kilometers from Earth. When suddenly, boom, your spacecraft explodes. The lights start flickering. Oxygen is leaking into space. And the only thing between you and certain death is a spacecraft held together by hope and duct tape. Sounds like a Hollywood movie, right? Except, this actually happened. Welcome to Apollo 13. The mission that was supposed to land on the moon, but became NASA's greatest survival story. And here's the crazy part. The astronauts never even landed on the moon. Yet millions of people still remember Apollo 13 as one of the greatest space missions ever. So, how did 3 astronauts survive nearly 4 days in space with almost no oxygen, very little power, and barely enough water? Let's find out. It all began on April 11, 1970. By then, NASA had already landed humans on the moon. Apollo 11 had made history. Apollo 12 had also landed successfully. People were starting to think moon missions were becoming, well, kind of normal. Television networks didn't even give Apollo 13 the same attention anymore. It was almost like saying, another moon mission? Cool, anyway. But nobody knew. This mission was about to become famous for a completely different reason. And it all started with 3 astronauts climbing aboard one giant rocket. The crew of Apollo 13 looked like the perfect team. Jim Lovell was the commander. By this point, he was already one of NASA's most experienced astronauts. If anyone could handle a crisis in space, it was him. Fred Haise was the lunar module pilot. His job was supposed to be simple. Land on the moon. No pressure, right? And then there was Jack Swigert. Believe it or not, he joined the mission only days before launch after another astronaut was exposed to German measles. Imagine preparing for years, then suddenly being told, congratulations, you are going to the moon next week. On April 11, 1970, the giant Saturn V rocket roared to life. Millions of pounds of thrust pushed Apollo 13 into the sky. Everything worked perfectly. The launch was smooth. The spacecraft was healthy. The crew was relaxed. NASA couldn't have asked for a better start. As the mission continued, the astronauts even filmed a television broadcast from space. They proudly showed viewers around the spacecraft. They showed where they ate, where they slept, and how they lived in zero gravity. The funny part? Almost nobody watched. People were getting bored of moon missions. To the public, Apollo 13 looked like just another routine flight. But only a few hours later, everything changed. Mission Control asked the crew to stir the oxygen tanks. This was a completely normal procedure. The astronauts had done it before. No one expected any problems. Then, bang! A loud explosion shook the spacecraft. The crew felt the entire ship shudder. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Instruments started failing. Oxygen levels began dropping. Something was terribly wrong. Then Jack Swigert spoke the words that would become famous around the world. Houston, we have had a problem. At first, nobody understood how serious it really was. But NASA was about to discover that Apollo 13 was no longer a moon mission. It had become a fight for survival. Within minutes, NASA engineers realized the situation was getting worse. Much worse. The explosion had damaged one of the spacecraft's oxygen tanks. Oxygen was leaking into space. And without oxygen, the fuel cells couldn't produce electricity. Without electricity, the spacecraft would die. Imagine your phone battery dropping from 100% to 0. Now imagine that phone is your spaceship. That's basically what was happening. The moon landing was immediately cancelled. Nobody cared about reaching the moon anymore. The only goal was getting home alive. NASA quickly came up with an emergency plan. The astronauts would move into the lunar module, the vehicle designed to land on the moon. Instead of being a moonlander, it would become a lifeboat. But there was a problem. The lunar module was designed for 2 astronauts, not 3, and not for several days. Every drop of water mattered. Every watt of electricity mattered. The crew shut down almost everything. Temperatures inside the spacecraft started falling. It became freezing cold. Water condensed on the walls. The astronauts wore extra clothing just to stay warm. But another danger was growing. Carbon dioxide. The air filters inside the lunar module weren't designed for 3 people. Carbon dioxide levels kept rising. Too much of it could kill the crew. NASA engineers rushed into action. They gathered random materials: plastic bags, cardboard, tape, instruction manuals. It looked less like rocket science and more like a school art project. Somehow, they created a device that allowed the astronauts to clean the air. And amazingly, it worked. One of the greatest engineering solutions in history was literally held together with tape. But even after solving that problem, Apollo 13 was still hundreds of thousands of kilometers from Earth. And the hardest part was still ahead. The astronauts now had one chance. Use the moon's gravity to swing around it and head back toward Earth. It sounds simple. It wasn't. One mistake could send them drifting into space forever. The crew had to perform engine burns with incredible precision. Normally computers would help. But most of the systems were powered down. So the astronauts had to steer using Earth as a reference point. Imagine parallel parking. Except you are doing it in space, while your life depends on it. Somehow, they got it right. Apollo 13 was finally heading home. But one final challenge remained: re-entry. As the spacecraft slammed into Earth's atmosphere, temperatures outside reached thousands of degrees. Communication disappeared. Mission control could only wait. 1 minute passed. Then another. Then another. The silence felt endless. People started fearing the worst. Then suddenly, a signal appeared. Apollo 13 was alive. The spacecraft emerged from the blackout. Cheers erupted across mission control. On April 17, 1970, Apollo 13 splashed safely into the Pacific Ocean. Against impossible odds, all 3 astronauts survived. Apollo 13 never landed on the moon. Yet it became one of NASA's greatest achievements. NASA later called it a successful failure. Because even though the mission failed, the crew came home alive. And sometimes, that's the greatest success of all. The story of Apollo 13 proves something important. Human beings are incredibly good at solving problems, especially when the alternative is floating through space forever. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Would you still volunteer for a moon mission after hearing the Apollo 13 story? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.